People who went to a wedding where the couple didn't last long. What happened? Story 1. During the reception, the bride's niece accidentally knocked over a drink that splashed the bride's shoes and she backhanded her in front of everyone. It caused a huge fight and the groom walked out right then. Story 2. My cousin female bride was dancing too much at the reception so the groom hit her. My uncles gave him a ride to the hospital which he needed very badly by the time he got there. It was annulled pretty quickly. Story 3. They were both 35, successful lawyer and doctor, but had never spent the night at each other's house. After the marriage they couldn't agree who would move in with who, and filed for divorce after 3 months. No one knows why they even got married at all. I guess they felt like they were supposed to at that age. Story 4. The wedding was beautiful and the most expensive wedding I have even been to. The bride worked for a fashion designer in NYC and had 3 different dresses she wore during different parts of the wedding. They announced she was pregnant soon after the wedding and unfortunately scans showed there were a few things wrong with the baby. The stress of the situation caused my cousin the husband to relapse and go back to his old heroin habit, which apparently she had no idea about. His drug use quickly spiraled and he got fired from his job for stealing, and then his wife found out about it all and moved out to stay with her parents. Baby was born 100 healthy. Scans had got it wrong. He tried to quit drugs and make amends to her but it was rocky and she divorced him before their first anniversary. He dipped off for a few years doing drugs, then got sober and found out he had brain cancer, relapsed, got sober again and had his brain tumor removed. Now he is still sober and remarried, has a few kids with his new wife. Story 5. The bride came out to Slipknot. They wrote their own vows which were, shall we say, overtly and uncomfortably, and they had been dating for a grand total of 2 whole weeks. Any and all attempts to inform them that this was a mistake were met with when you know, or you're just jealous, but hey, a free bar is a free bar. Edit. So many questions. The song was the last bonus track on Subliminal Verses. I'm told this track is called Danger, Keep Away. The wedding itself was a small thing with a registrar in a council building. The staff there were very professional, and only laughed quietly. The after party was at a pub owned by the groom's uncle. The honeymoon was at Butlin's. They were separated by the time they got back. They were not in the military, just young dumb. We are all white trash, and that's fine. I bought them a toaster from Argos. I didn't ask for it back. Story 6. Actually, I performed a wedding at a local bar. We left about 10 p.m. The newlyweds got drunk, started fighting, and were arrested, spending the night in jail. Story 7. My brother got married to a woman from Russia while in the army. The whole family thought she married him for a green card, but he was convinced it was love. They had their ceremony in a gazebo on a military base. It was a small gathering of family that traveled to it from out of state. His best friend since high school got ordained just so he could marry them. My brother was really excited. He wore a nice suit and the bride, well, she showed up in a bright pink tracksuit. They divorced a year later. Story 8. Saw some signs at the wedding like ignoring each other, making rude and snide remarks publicly, etc. They tried to fix their marriage by having a kid earlier than they planned and that led to divorce. Both are married to different people now and have had more kids. By all accounts far more civil, even cordial with each other. Story 9. I didn't actually attend the wedding. During lockdown, when we were working from home, this one colleague was always reluctant to have work-related one-to-one calls with male colleagues such as myself. Eventually, I found out that her fiancé would moan and get jealous that she was talking to other men on Teams, even if it was 100 professional and work-related. Even then, I thought whoa, but figured it wasn't my place to say anything. They got married about 2 years ago. About 9 months ago, he asked for a divorce by text as he, Mr. Jealous, had found someone else. Story 10. Both my brother and sister had short marriages. Sister husband turned up to the wedding high on crack. She fell in love with someone else. Brother had a destination wedding on the top of a mountain that took half a day for the guests to hike, including my dad who was missing a kneecap. They wound up with an open marriage, but the wife ran off with the other guy and their cat. Story 11. Didn't go to the wedding, but did go to the bachelorette goodbye party. We were in college, she was 19, from a super conservative family. Her longtime boyfriend visited her once and was terrible, wouldn't talk to anyone, basically sulked the whole time. He clearly hated that she was in school. When he proposed, her parents pulled the plug on college tuition because she didn't need it anymore, so she dropped out at the end of her freshman year, moved back to Central California and got married to the... I never saw her again, but from what I've seen on Facebook she finally dumped him in her mid-20s, moved across the country to get away from her family, and was working restaurant jobs while trying to get a degree. We're in our 30s now, and she still seems pretty angry about everything she missed out on and how she was treated, but she's living her life on her own terms. Not a happy ending, but I'm happy for her. Story 12. Went to Singapore to attend a female friend's wedding with a Singaporean guy. She'd been so happy up until the actual wedding. My friends and I arrived like 3 days before the ceremony, and the wedding girl was visibly troubled when she met us. We just thought it was nerves and all that. Wedding day comes and she comes out in her full wedding gown, with an absolute face, like I'm about to murder someone kind of face. I'm not even kidding, never smiled once during the whole ceremony and the dinner. She loosened up a bit in the after party, and my GF went and asked if she was okay. She waved my GF away. Right after the wedding, she went back to Hong Kong for work, claiming there she needs to do. Then COVID hit and we're practically not allowed to travel anywhere for a year or two. We were worried about her marriage, but she was always rather evasive. not answering our questions or just shooting the whenever we talked about it. Our circle of friends learned not to ask about it anymore. Fast forward 5 years until now. It turns out that she never actually got married. The ceremony and everything was a show. We gathered that the dude probably had another girlfriend in Singapore and she only found out right before the wedding. But then she never said it out loud, hinted it here or there with some close friends of hers. Shit's unreal. 6 or 7 of us, with a 4-year-old kid, flew to Singapore just to witness a show of a wedding. Story 13. One of my best friends got married. None of us had met her before, but we hadn't seen him in years and were super excited to reconnect. This was the most elaborate wedding I had ever been to, tuxes, an incredible meal, a hall that resembled Hogwarts, an opera performance and a string quartet playing his favorite rap songs. It was incredible, yet we just knew it wasn't him. We started to mingle with her friends at a table, and we soon learned they didn't really know her. We brushed it off as we just wanted to be there for him and have a good time. That was until the mother of the bride made a harmless joke about the bride being difficult as a child. This led to the bride eventually storming off after the dances, locking herself in a room, getting blackout and berating him, his family and many guests who had flown across the country to be there. It all started to click that she was just absolutely psycho. Most of the guests caught the vibe and left by 9:30 p.m. Me and my friends eventually sat with her friends and shut down the party, from 150 guests down to 8. Why would we let everything go to waste? He quickly came over after he was able to calm her down and apologize to us and left. We honestly thought we'd never see him again. 6 weeks later he called me, he had returned home, they were done. The story just has so many layers to it. Looking back, in the one day we had been around the situation there was so many red flags. Thankfully we have him back and he's thriving. Story 14. I'm offering up this one because it actually, ultimately, has a happy ending. I got to know a guy in my hometown who had a wife from somewhere abroad. Every time I was around at his house she'd glare at him, refuse to speak to or acknowledge me, and just walk around like the physical incarnation of a thunderstorm. She was the exact same toward everyone else as well. When I asked my friend about this, he admitted she didn't really like where they lived, that being a town in the UK, and in fairness, it was not the nicest area of town by a very long shot, but he seemed oblivious to this. Their apartment was great, but the area around it looked like a set from The Walking Dead. That marriage lasted 6 months. When I asked him after why they got married, he told me he thought that since he was now at that time 30 years old, he should probably settle down, which is the daftest reason to get married anyone's ever given me. Then this happened told to me by him after the fact. From time to time he'd get emails from an old friend of his, a girl who had been a part of his circle of friends when he was younger, and who had since returned home to Asia. When she learned he'd married, her emails dried up for a few years. Just days after his divorce, she got back in touch for the first time in a long time and he wrote back with the news he was divorced. 3 days later she flew halfway around the world to see him. They became a couple after a couple of days, married 1 year later, and now have 3 kids, and live in a much nicer area. Story 15. Ill start. The bride and groom got married at 20, and the bride's dad asked her to return his credit card during his speech because she can't use daddy's money now that she's married. He then ran over and started cutting his own credit card while the DJ played Rich Girl. Story 16. My friend's mom got married to a trucker, was a pretty nice guy, treated her well, took care of her financially. About a year and his other 3 wives from other states group called her to inform her that he was also married to all of them as well. They all divorced him at the same time. Nothing was even finalized yet and he was sitting at a bar drinking. A fight broke out between other people and he got shoved off his bar stool, hit his head pretty good, went home to sleep it off and never woke up. Story 17. I live in a small town in Switzerland, so everybody knows everybody. A couple was to marry on Saturday. The guest came along and while they were greeted the bride excused herself. She left to have a former male friend of her one last time and got caught. We used to joke about her blowing of the wedding. This thing happened years ago, but the both are still living in our town separatively and I can't unhear the story when I see them. Story 18. A week before the wedding the bride walked in on the groom the dog's stuffed toy. They went through with a very elaborate wedding and I'm pretty sure it's because she wanted a wedding, not a marriage in the first place. They annulled the marriage 2 weeks later. Her parents are still paying off the wedding debt and that happened 5 years ago. Story 19. I was going to be best man at a friend's wedding. We got together the evening before the wedding, and all seemed well then. At 7:30 the next morning, I got a phone call from my friend. He said that the wedding was called off, and he would call and explain later. He didn't. It was 2 weeks later, I finally got a hold of his dad, and he said that his son was away at boot camp, and wouldn't be coming back. I never heard from him or the bride again, so I don't really know what happened. Story 20. She was way hotter than my cousin, by like a lot. She was nicer than him, like a lot, so she left him. I still don't know why she married him in the first place. She made more than he does, so it wasn't looks, personality, or money. Story 21. Went to a wedding that the bride's parents spent $30,000 for. 1 month later, the husband got a better job in a city 90 minutes away. The wife didn't want to move that far from her parents. They were divorced less than 2 months of marriage. Story 22. The relationship between the bride's father and the groom was contentious from before the wedding. At it, one of the bride's cousins had a dress with a cleavage, and one of the groom's cousins, drunk off his, came to her and told her he wanted, ad verbatim, to her. One tells her date, who promptly punches the groom's cousin. This begins a full-on family versus family brawl. that culminates with the groom punching the bride's father, and this man taking his daughter away and keeping her away from her husband for 10 days. It got annulled. Can't imagine why. Story 23. My very sweet and adorable cousin has epilepsy. We really liked her boyfriend turned fiancé and they seemed like a great match. We were all confused when she divorced him a year after their wedding. Turns out after they were officially married a switch flipped inside him and he became very emotionally abusive and manipulative. He would hold her epilepsy medication hostage in order for her to do whatever he asked. He was so psychologically abusive. As soon as she gathered enough courage to leave him, it's been amazing seeing her recovery to being her authentic, free self again after him. Story 24. Witnessed by my parents. Not me. During the wedding reception, someone asked the bride and groom when they were going to have kids. They had been dating for 8 years before getting married, so everyone assumed they were going to have kids immediately after getting married. The groom loudly said, "Oh man, I'm never having kids." The bride burst into tears and had to go to the restroom. They lasted about a year. You'd think that's something they would have talked about during that long time, but who knows. Story 25. A few weeks later, the bride drove to her parents' house after work instead of her home and said she didn't want to be married anymore and asked them to fix it. Another one, bride left months later because groom's drug use had quickly spiraled out of control. Story 26. My friend is a wedding photographer in Australia and she had a couple where the groom was visibly recoiling from the bride in every photo. She couldn't get a photo of him looking comfortable or happy around his bride. No idea what was going on, but they didn't last long. Story 27. 1. The groom, a bridesmaid at the reception, got caught behind the bar. Another, bride, the best man in the limo on the way to the reception because the groom rode with his parents in the second limo. The limo driver told the groom. Story 28. She had a baby she never bonded with. Shortly thereafter, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and hospitalized for months. When she was released, he went to court to get an order mandating that she only be allowed to see her child with another adult present. They mutually decided at that point to end the marriage. He now has full custody of the child and she has limited visitation rights. Sad story. Story 29. My cousin got married pretty early into a relationship in her early 20s. It was a very simple wedding as not much could be afforded. They had the groom's 12-year-old cousin be the photographer because I was a bridesmaid. When cutting the cake, my cousin fed the piece of cake to her new husband and did the usual little show but didn't make that big of a mess. It was his turn. He absolutely tried to smash it into my cousin's face. They got divorced. I can't remember how long after the wedding that was, but maybe at least a year later. Now she's remarried and seems very happy. They're on holiday right now. You'll be able to meet him in roughly 2 months. Story 30. In contrast to some others here, this couple lasted long. A full 6 months, until she confessed to cheating on him, repeatedly, with several men for several years, sometimes with multiple men at the same time. Dude was a mess for a year after that. Story 31. My good friend and college roommate got married to his high school sweetheart as he was working through grad school. It was a beautiful wedding, but a few of us noticed the lack of enthusiasm on the face of the bride. Fast forward to the honeymoon, and he had planned fun little couples excursions for each day of the trip. She wouldn't go on any of them, and insisted on staying in the room reading books. After the 3rd day of her staying in, he went to the pool bar and chatted with the bartender and other guests for a few hours before returning to the room. She accused him of drunkenly knocking her over during an attempted hug, followed by her ranting through tears about how she should never have married him. She booked an early flight home, and the annulment was already underway by the time he returned 2 days later. Turns out, she had been voicing her concerns about getting married for months before the big day, and her father family and my buddy had persuaded her to go through with it. Her initial story upon returning was that he had thrown her down, but within a week, she had come clean that it was definitely an accident, which we all knew. BC, my friend, is one of the kindest and gentlest people I know. He's remarried to a lovely woman and has a young daughter, and his ex is traveling the world. Moral of the story is not to marry someone who clearly doesn't want to get married. Story 32. Bride had a very Instagram wedding, and it was quite over the top. She had 2 different dresses. Videographer who made it look like it was a film. Turns out the groom had been sleeping with the maid of honor for 6 months prior to the wedding, and it was found out when the mo was crying saying this should have been me at the party afterwards. Cake tasted absolutely incredible though. 1010. Story 33. My grandmother was married before she met my grandfather. This is back in the 50s. I've only heard the story once or twice, but she was 17, he was in his 20s, she was dirt poor in Kentucky, and he had a job. They got married, and within a few weeks he got pretty rough with her. When she told her parents, it came to light that had been abusive for a while. Her dad and brothers didn't know her new husband as well as they'd like, since he was going to be part of the family and all, so they invited him on a hunting trip. Anyway, there was some kind of accident, and the guy got shot. Since had been in the service and she was his widow, my grandmother got some veterans benefits for the rest of her life. Shortly thereafter, when she was 19 to 20, she met my grandfather, and they were married just a few months shy of 50 years, one of the most compatible couples I've ever met. Story 34. Wedding was fine, but then the groom tried to throw the bride off the balcony of the penthouse apartment they were staying in on the wedding night. I know this because I was a bridesmaid and she called me and another bridesmaid and asked us to stay the night with them in their hotel room. Super awkward, but she assured us it wasn't a thing. Turns out she didn't feel safe being alone with him. Rightly so, they hid it well in public. He seemed like a decent guy until then from what I had seen. Obviously that wasn't accurate. Why she married him I'll never know. I guess she was afraid of what he'd do if she said no. Story 35 Wife got pregnant unexpectedly. Her rich family freaked out, called in all their connections to pull a $100K wedding and reception within a few weeks. Wife had a miscarriage after 6 months. A year later they were divorced and their marriage annulled. Neither the wife nor the husband really wanted to marry, but they caved due to pro-life family pressure. I think they would have made a go of it had they had the kid, but once that was out of the picture the marriage fell pretty quickly. Story 36 Groom met girl, fell hard in love, and pushed girl to quickly marry, he said love of his life. 3 months later after they married, he left her, victim blaming and gaslighting all around. He leaves out the part where he emotionally beat her into the ground with him, just kidding, and you know what I mean kinda. He didn't really leave her after 3 months of marriage. He went back, and left for some other reason, and went back, and left for yet another reason. This went on for months, and the wife never even knew problems existed. He destroyed that girl. I hope she finds someone who doesn't use love as a weapon against her. Story 37 High school friend and tennis partner. She fell in love with a high school football jock that wanted to be a police officer. He got the job, and beat the brakes off my friend just 3 months after she had his child. She divorced him on the spot. She had enough. Looking back I can see the red flags he was flying in high school. I guess I just didn't have the voice or knowledge to know better. I came from a shitty home. She's doing good now, and I'm happy for her. Story 38 I helped a bride coworker from my old job get the wedding she wanted. Not her MILs. I did tell the bride that I can only help sort her MIL mama's boy groom out for the wedding, but not for the marriage. I pointed out that MIL will get involved with everything in their marriage. The groom will side his mum. Also told her about the multiple red flags I saw in their bride-groom relationship. I advise her to nope out of marrying the mama's boy his mum, before it's too late. Bride believed that the second they say I do, the groom will change from mama's boy to perfect husband. Their marriage lasted 6 months. This is what the bride told me was the final straw. The couple was having their honeymoon a few months after the wedding day. The bride had points to upgrade their flight tickets to first class. Bride was caught off guard by MIL being at the airport. The groom said his mum will fly first class and bride will fly economy. Then groom said about their hotel arrangements. His mum in honeymoon suite and bride in cheap single bedroom. Story 39 Apparently the bride wanted an open marriage and the groom didn't. It was me, I was the groom, married in February, separated in May. The fella she was seeing on the side wifed her up for better or worse. Good on him, I guess. She was extremely abusive throughout the relationship, and from the inside I didn't really see it until a confidant talked to me about it after it ended. I now have a partner who isn't abusive and a wonderful child, so I don't feel like I lost much except for the mental and emotional toll of it all. Story 40 It's me, the couple. She started cheating on me like 3 months after the wedding that I can prove, but I'm like pretty sure she was beforehand, at least emotionally. She cried at the altar, but not a sweet happy cry. It seemed like a really upset about to make a big mistake cry. I remember thinking this doesn't seem right, why is she crying like that? But she gave me no hints at second-guessing the whole wedding at all, so I literally had no clue until we were getting married. So we went through with it. She started cheating 3 months later. I found out about it 3 months after that, and we got divorced. Story 41 The wedding was gross, just overtly and shallow. She got pregnant less than a year later. He blamed her and beat the out of her. She offered to have an abortion, but he's pro-life, so that pissed him off more, and he sent her to the hospital again. They'd been having unprotected since the wedding and everyone knew it, so he was the only person who was surprised. They split up after the beatings but didn't divorce until after she had 3 more children because they thought they couldn't afford it. They had no assets or marital debt, so they could have divided it. But neither of them were ever bright. He's never paid a cent of child support willingly. His tax returns go to her now or met his son, who hates him. Story 42 My ex-sister-in-law married a guy she hadn't known very long, and although that isn't any reliable indicator of how long a relationship will last, I found it very disturbing that the groom stood with his back turned toward his bride while she walked down the aisle. One of his groomsmen had to tap him on the arm and whisper in his ear that he was supposed to turn around when the wedding march started. She was maybe only 3 steps away from him when he finally turned around to see her. Less than a year later he just came home from work one day and told her he had been with someone else since before they were married and she had to leave. Story 43 Father of the child the bride was carrying, not the groom's, turned up at the reception. She left with him. Until then I had never seen a human so devastated. Story 44 One cheated. The cheater was given an ultimatum to either break up or stop talking to the affair partner, then prove their love devotion with marriage. It turns out marriage isn't a good solution for relationship issues. Story 45 I went to a wedding that was basically a gaslighting trap for the bride. The groom was his only skill was scamming unemployment for extensions based on fabricated reasons and grifting off the bride. They had a newborn and she had 2 other kids that he had calling him daddy at the time of the wedding, which was at his parents' house and performed by one of his buddies that got ordained just for this event. The bride was working 2 jobs to afford a home for the both of them. My wife was the only bridesmaid that was her friend. Basically, throughout the night, there were several ill-concealed insults to the bride. He danced with other women before the first dance. He broke off their first dance awkwardly and quickly but danced with his mom for the full song. The bride ate alone with the baby while he ate sitting next to and flirting with other women at a different table. Then as the night went on things just got out of hand. He and the entire bridal party excepting my wife continued to ignore her while dirty dancing with other women. His parents said some nasty to her, and when she finally got upset and confronted him, the groom's parents literally snatched the baby and kicked her off of the property. She was not able to see her own newborn until county sheriffs came 3 days later and basically said, if you make us get a warrant, we're going to arrest you for kidnapping and turn the house upside down. Unfortunately, he still bothers her to this day, as he is father of one of her kids. She has custody now, but he still starts problems. He's probably the only person on the planet that I can genuinely say, if I ever come across him somewhere not in a well-lit public area, I'd just immediately start kicking the out of him. Edit to add, it never was actually a legal marriage. They signed the papers, but obviously nothing was ever filed and the minister was a part of the scam. Story 46. He was a Marine Corps officer, fighter jet pilot. She was smart, pretty and crazy. She admitted in the bathroom before the wedding that she cheated on him in college. No worries, let it go, they both had just graduated. His best man blew the speech in a way that Bukowski couldn't have predicted or explained. It was a rambling of swear words and secrets best left in the back halls of dorms and pubs. Story 47. Seemed like the bride and groom both knew this wasn't going to last long. They kept talking about how nice the party was, but never about the excitement of being together and their future together. Story 48. My stepsister-in-law got married when she was a teenager and her husband was young as well and a moron. I'm not even sure it lasted a year. I remember one thing he did was brake check cars multiple times, causing crashes and needing physical therapy. I can't imagine being that god stupid. I remember he and his friends drinking illegally at the wedding like they were cool, but they just looked like clowns. I hated to see her marry an idiot like that because she is super smart and had goals, and his goal was just to be a moron. Story 49. Wedding was fine, but afterwards the groom got a job that required him to relocate. The bride would move over a bit later, and she, a daily emotional alcoholic, was already giving him for having a few female colleagues, and when she moves there she wants to meet them. Like she was really paranoid, even though the groom is a decent loyal guy. Getting closer to her moving to where he was based, I overheard her already drunk again talking unjustified smack about her husband to her friend over the phone, and was often quick to point out she'll divorce him for just about any scenario. Anyway, she moves in with him at their new place, and not long after they got divorced. She does some traveling for her work, and turns out she was her driver. Marriage didn't even last a few months. Story 50. One of my closest friends was in a relationship for 10 years. They got married, she got pregnant, she didn't want kids, he did. She got an abortion. They were married and divorced within a year after a 10-year relationship. Story 51. It was a destination wedding. There were no bridesmaids and 2 best men, old colleagues of the groom he wasn't really close to. They had 3 photographers, one that came as part of the wedding package, one the bride paid to have flown out with them, and one friend of the couple who took all the photos on his phone, but otherwise worked as though he had been hired for the job. No one had anything good to say about them as a couple. Her family weren't invited. His family spent all evening bitching about how awful the wedding prep had been since the bride cut so many people out of the wedding with just weeks to go, hence no bridesmaids, etc. The photographer who'd been hired to fly out sat with us at one point and offloaded about how stressful the whole day had been, calling the bride a bridezilla. I'm not sure, quickly they separated after, but we never saw the wedding photos. I think it was a matter of weeks. We spent over $2,000 to be there. Story 52. My friend got married at one of the most expensive weddings I'd ever seen. It's a big 12th century 4-star hotel in the middle of the countryside. They had 2 ceremonies, a legal one with just a few of us there, and then an amazing meal, and then in the evening a religious blessing at the bigger party in front of a couple of hundred people, then fireworks and a totally free bar all day. It was probably about $40K at least. The whole relationship had started strangely. My friend was pushing 50 and told his 23-year-old partner that he was 36. They lived in the garage of the partner's grandmother. Friend came clean about age. Partner said he always knew and that it was fine but not to tell his friends and family. They'd only been together about 3 months before they got married. At the wedding it was very obvious that my friend was older than the partner's parents. After the wedding they continued living in a garage. On their first anniversary they stayed in a hotel near us and we went to get dinner with them, and my friend's partner talked about all the clubbing and going out he did while my friend was much more the homemaker. About 1 month later, friend messaged me to tell me they've split because he didn't like that 23 years old went out partying and to festivals and put with his mates all the time. He wanted him to stay home and be in bed by 9. Thing is, my friends had previously been on a long-term relationship with someone younger and they split for the same reason. Side note, my husband and I had got married a month before their wedding and all our friends that came to the wedding as couples are no longer together. All have split other than one where the husband died. Another one of the couple lasted 3 months after he found her sexting a colleague. They'd been together for about 10 years before getting married. She's now married to the new guy. Story 53. My cousin had this really glamorous wedding to a rich dude, so it was no spare expense wedding. It was one of those she was an air stewardess and got hit on by the passenger, dated, and then eventually he proposed. I remember my mom keep going on about how lucky she was to marry to a dude this rich, and he wasn't old either, 30 and handsome. My cousin was 26, but she annulled the wedding a week after because she found he had with another woman as close to a week before their wedding. I thought it was very strong of her to drop him immediately. She was practically like an orphan growing up. Her mom was a mistress and her dad was married with another woman with kids. Both her mom and dad abandoned her in care of an uncle who already got his children too, and her life was not easy in that household. She was treated like an obligated burden. I was really sad that she didn't at least have a good outcome and meet a good man who can be good to her. Another famous one is absolutely heartbreaking. Billionaire daughter, celebrity in my country, married some dude after 2 years of dating and apparently he completely changed after marriage and became abusive. She divorced him 2 months later and he wanted all his wedding gifts back. Here is the story on the gift story on divorce. This lady has quite an unlucky life as her ex-husband, the one she previously had a son with, is in jail too. Story 54. My cousin was in a toxic relationship for a long time. They got engaged and he tried to leave her before the wedding. Her family, apparently drug-doing, troublemaking hillbillies, pressured him into staying. The wedding was called off about a week before, and was back on in less than 24 hours. He married her and they separated like the next day. They're getting a divorce now. She just had a baby, and we're not sure if it's his or not. This happened pretty recently, so it's causing some family drama. Story 55. It was an arranged marriage and she quickly went from independent girl boss to a slave for his whole family in a different country. You could tell at the wedding when his mates were all talking about him taking her virginity that night and how he'd gotten plenty of practice in before the wedding. Glad she got out of there. I hope her family understood.